Hi, I'm Carrie Dolan, Assistant Managing Editor at Forbes, and I'm here today as part of our Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans coverage with Jim Breyer, a Forbes 400 member and a very esteemed venture capitalist. Thank you for joining us, Jim.
Carrie, what a pleasure.
You are probably best known as one of the earliest backers of Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and a big beneficiary of that runaway success, thanks to your own $1 million investment way long before the IPO. But this summer, you've had what I think is another huge hit, and that is Circle. Tell us about Circle Internet, which went public in June. What is it, and when and why did you invest?
Actually, there are a lot of similarities between the origins of Circle and my first investment in Circle and Mark Zuckerberg. Both really were driven by Harvard University in many ways. In the case of Mark, of course, he had stopped out in 2005 from Harvard and moved to Palo Alto. And in April of 2005, I met Mark, and we spent a week negotiating hard and came to an agreement on that first deal in 2005, which was 4.5 cents in terms of the investment.
When by 4.5 cents you mean
per share.
Per share. Okay,
correct.
Got it.
I
think
no, no.
4.5 cent investment, that'd be like quite a return. Yeah.
No,
4.5 cents
it
per
was
share,
$1 million personally, 10 million from Axel. I joined the board, and it was 4.5 cents a share versus today, where we are now. So still on the IS held basis, and there's still a number of shares held. It's up 17,000x or so. On Circle, I had worked twice before with Jeremy Allaire in Bright Cove when he came to me and said, I'm starting a new company in enterprise video management. And I said, Jeremy, I'm in. We shook hands and invested in Bright Cove. That company went public in 2012. And then in 2013, Jeremy called me and said, I have a new company I'm thinking about. Would you like to talk about it? And I flew to Boston. I was on the board at the time of the Harvard Corporation, which most people have heard about now. It was not as well known back in the day. And Jeremy and the co-founder, Sean, and I walked through Harvard Square, and he talked about the internet's need for digital money. And it really resonated. And we talked a lot about what that might look like. And after several hours of discussion and walking in and around Cambridge, Massachusetts, we shook hands on the deal and invested in Circle. That price per share was 27 cents. To give you a perspective, today it's trading north of 140, and it's been a wonderful ride.
And when Jeremy founded the company back in 2013, it was, and I remember the announcement was this was a place to buy and hold and store crypto assets,
Correct.
right? So kind of like Coinbase today.
Correct.
That's not at all what Circle's doing today. Talk a little bit about the evolution. I mean, you're not competing with Coinbase, you're partnering. You're paying them a lot of money, actually. Talk about how that evolution happened.
Jeremy's conception at the very beginning was we are building infrastructure and technology to enable a variety of payments on the internet. Digital money. We want to facilitate digital money. And there were a number of different characteristics of what that looked like. But the fundamental premise was we want to build infrastructure in and around blockchain and enable digital money around the world to move seamlessly, which is absolutely compelling even today, which is remarkable and a remarkable statement about Jeremy. The stablecoin idea came from Sean and Jeremy about 5 years later, where they realized that people will want to move in and out of digital assets and the traditional banking and financial infrastructure as seamlessly as possible. And that was indeed, call it 6 years ago now, the conception and an aha moment So a lot of the applications we will see in the world of digital money will be programmable and very specifically in and around the blockchain be used for a variety of business to business as well as business to consumer and consumer to consumer like applications.
Even though I would say the studies show that most stablecoin now is being used for crypto trading. Right?
That is correct.
That's the biggest use of
that is
all
correct.
stablecoin, right?
But I think we've lost sight of how fundamental in general the blockchain is to the world of finance. And what we will continue to see is payments where we all know there are traditional vendors that take 20% of a $100 payment that might be sent from the US to Mexico. 20% is outrageous.
Yeah.
And it takes 3 or 4 days to clear the banks. What blockchain enables, and stablecoins is one element of the blockchain, is that to be a few cents and occur instantaneously. So suddenly we can enable worldwide payments around different applications. Some might need to be programmed. It might be a heavy inventory payment where large enterprises might want to build relationships with 10 or so of their major vendors. That will take customization. But again, the stablecoin and the infrastructure in and around the stablecoin is what enables all those payments to occur.
I mean, one of the things that I've learned in trying to understand why stablecoins have potential use for companies around the world, let's say, is that they're maybe not so necessary if you're in the United States and you're dealing with another US company. But if you're outside the US and you're in Thailand and you want to pay a vendor in Finland or something like that, and you've got two different currencies you're starting with, and you don't want to deal with an international wire transfer or that might have a big fee and that kind of stuff, that there could be some value.
I think there's tremendous value.
In terms of that distribution, that you've really relied on Coinbase to increase the distribution of.
It's been a wonderful partnership. And the last several years, both companies, I think, have really benefited from the mutual partnership that they've had.
The Circle's mission statement is raise global economic prosperity through frictionless exchange of value. So how exactly will global economic prosperity be raised?
Again, on the international payments that you mentioned, if I'm a farmer in India and I want to get paid quickly for my crops by a local bank or a medium-sized bank in India or a financial institution elsewhere, perfect example, you're going to do it through what would be stable coins and payments in and around the blockchain.
So to lower the cost of transactions that are already happening, essentially.
Lower the cost dramatically, but speed dramatically. So again, what's broken globally in many cases is it just takes so darn long to get paid. And it takes so darn long in the world of even healthcare globally, but in the United States, to get reimbursements from insurance companies and providers. And so that's where the blockchain, I think, will be fundamental. And again, stable coins and their role on top of the blockchain to enable faster, instantaneous approvals as well as payments is what will make a fundamental difference.
So it's less banking the unbanked and more facilitating transactions among existing businesses.
That's my belief.
Okay. You've got Facebook, you've got Circle. Do you have another home run in your portfolio, do you think?
I knock on a lot of wood. We always need luck. I've been fortunate, and Breyer Capital has been fortunate. I've had 4 companies that have achieved realized returns of well over 100 times. There are a number.
And what are those for? So, I mean, besides Facebook and
Facebook,
Circle.
Circle, Redback Networks, and Foundry Networks, all over 100x in realized returns. I always talk about realized returns.
And by realized, you mean they actually either got acquired or went public?
That is correct. And the money has been taken off the table. So not just on an as held or other basis where the cash has not been received. There are another 15 companies that have achieved better than 20x historically. And again, there are some wonderful companies in that, Spotify, the Boston Celtics, and others, where the cash-on-cash return has been better than 20 times. There are at least 10 companies in the current portfolio that are sitting at better than 10x at private valuations. Open Evidence being one that is as exciting as anything I can think of. And again, another third-time entrepreneur, Daniel Nadler, backed him twice. In 2022, Daniel called me and said, I'm working on where AI will evaluate what is being provided in medical journals, New England Journal of Medicine and others, and we're providing that information to doctors and nurses at the point of operation, at the point of the doctor. And today about 40%, 40, as I checked in with Daniel this morning, of doctors in the United States use Open Evidence daily. And again, when I think about characteristics of fundamental businesses with enormous upside, I think of companies like Open Evidence, where there is very deep artificial intelligence, experts in AI, passionate about delivering to doctors and making a difference. Daniel is fond of saying doctors and nurses are heroes, and we should enable everything we can to make them the best possible heroes that we can. And when you're getting that kind of 40% usage of all doctors in the United States, that to me is tremendous.
And the company's still how old? I forget how old it is.
3 years.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we've raised some rounds this year from outstanding friends in the venture capital community. But when Daniel first called me in 2022, I just said, again, tell me what you're doing, Daniel. And after a 2-hour conversation with Daniel, I said, count me in.
And that was
Breyer
really
Capital
interesting.
invested.
Yeah. Am I correct in remembering that the doctors don't actually have to pay to look this up?
It's free.
It's free. And then the business model, remind me, how does the business model work?
We get payments right now from many of the big journal providers and data providers. So there are companies out
They're
there.
advertising? What are they doing? How are they paying?
There is some advertising, and there will be more. Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, New England Journal of Medicine, these are all partners of Open Evidence. And today, they want to be in front of the very best doctors. And now, in fact, it's gone, as you would imagine, with the use of artificial intelligence, we can target doctors of very significant specialties or by region, and over time that will be extraordinarily valuable.
Yeah, what I remember reading in Forbes.
In Forbes.
About that.
I was interviewed for the article.
Yeah, which is a great article, was just how overwhelming. It's a fire hose of information that's in all these academic journals that doctors and nurses don't have time to read it all. So if they can just get what they need at their fingertips at the time they need on a particular question, on a particular patient, if they need it, that seemed like really the valuable part of this. Am I right?
That is exactly right. And often the most compelling companies start as very, very simple propositions, in my experience. Again, whether it was Spotify, Facebook, we could go on and on, Etsy, Open Evidence. The idea is usually very simple, where many of the questions usually are around defensibility, or the questions are around, this sounds obvious. Why will Google / Alphabet, Microsoft, now Meta, we could go on and on, Apple, why will they not do it? And in fact, there's a reason startups excel, particularly when there's something as remarkable and as groundbreaking as AI. And when I started throwing myself into AI in 2016, I knew, again, instinctually, if I spent a couple years reading everything, meeting the very best professors at Stanford and MIT and Harvard, this would be time well worth spending. And in fact, there was another couple pieces, if you will, of that AI puzzle. On a more tragic note, my father went in for a routine physical in 2015 at age 80, and his platelets were extraordinarily low, and he was diagnosed with leukemia. And we spent the next 6 months in great hospitals trying to navigate what is the best way to care. There were drugs that were not yet developed. There were clinical trials that were not yet available for him. He passed, and a couple years later, my mom was diagnosed after a routine physical with ovarian cancer. 2 years of deep chemotherapy at, again, the very best hospitals. There were clinical trials where she was not eligible, or they were remote and she didn't want to leave family and friends. And that's when the sparks continued to collide with what I was seeing day to day with artificial intelligence, with recommendations from Sergey Brin and Mark Zuckerberg that, Jim, you have to throw yourself into the area of artificial intelligence. And we were seeing very little promise of artificial intelligence when it came to patients and patient outcomes. And that is today exploding. And when people ask me, aren't you concerned about artificial general intelligence and what happens when AI is superior in many ways to how humans think? One, no one has figured out the neuroscience of true AI and the judgment qualities that are necessary for important decisions. But when it comes to AI and medicine and the life sciences and healthcare and patients, we're at the very beginning. And I would say 99% of what I see is saving lives day to day and improving lifespan in a meaningful way.
You mean how AI is being used even now?
Correct.
Already.
And we're just at the very beginning. I am working on probably 6 new projects, and a lot has to happen when I pull together different medical institutions and universities. But one is a world-class children's transplant team. One is a world-class transplant team in a broader perspective. Neither naturally partners with the other institution. And part of what happens in the world of academic institutions as well as medical schools and hospitals, there's very little joint interaction. And in fact, with AI, there needs to be far more of that than ever before. So of the 20 companies I've backed where they're focused on AI in the life sciences and medicine, in fact, the hardest part of my day job is getting the genius 30-year-olds, she or he out of Alphabet and Microsoft, to interact with the genius physicians, whether it's cancer, whether it's cardiology, neuroscience, on and on. But it's that mix of skills that is most challenging, most humbling, but which provides the massive breakouts going forward.
And those folks aren't connecting because they operate in such different worlds, they don't communicate well? What's the hard part there? Why wouldn't a genius from Alphabet be happy to sit with a genius from UC San Francisco or Stanford
It doesn't occur naturally in their day-to-day.
They don't run into each other.
They don't run into each other. And usually what it takes is the genius, again, 30-year-old, 35-year-old, late 20s, whatever it might be, AI person who has been educated at Stanford and MIT in particular. It's a personal experience with a certain area of medicine from a family perspective or friend's perspective. And rather than work on ad optimization for the next 5 years, she or he typically will say, Jim, I want to do something mission critical around where my background in AI will make a fundamental difference in neurology. Parkinson's, for example. These are all real examples. And so there isn't that deep, visceral, automatic day-to-day connection that occurs between UCSF and Alphabet or Microsoft and Harvard Medical School. And that's what needs to happen more and more, because you need both working together, and that is the promise of the startups.
And so that's what you're trying to do in some of the ones you've invested in.
That's That's my day job.
Yeah. Are you concerned at all about too much venture capital flowing into AI? Is there a bit of an AI bubble?
There's always a bubble. There's always an AI bubble, and there's always an internet bubble or a social networking bubble. When I think back through my history, in many cases, the trend was very fundamental. And then typically there is an enormous amount of capital. What I love about early stage investing, there needs to be a mix of instincts and skills that I would say are quite rare, just like the great entrepreneurs. You need passion, you need courage, you need an ability to see the very best deals. So if there's a group of 3 people at Alphabet working on something, my job and our job at Breyer Capital is to ensure, as they think about spinning out, that we are the first call or among the first calls. And when we're not, we really go through a very rigorous process on why not.
But that's hard though, because there's so many. Think about how many entrepreneurs there are. And at the end of the day, Breyer Capital is a pretty small team, relatively
We're a
speaking.
small team.
Yeah. So to know everyone, I mean, I guess you're picking your spots, right? You're picking where you want the universities you want to be in touch with, but there could be really smart people, heck, in other countries or in other states that you aren't in touch with that are,
Absolutely.
That's the hard part, right? Is you can only do so much, right?
You can only do so much, but in the areas we've chosen, which is where AI and finance, AI and medicine and healthcare intersect, if we are not a first call, we are not doing our job. So again, the best source of our new deals, and I mentioned some of the history with some of the entrepreneurs we've had, the best source of our new deals are university leaders, leaders of the best medical schools in the country, or department chairs. They're Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Benioff, Michael Dell, people we've worked with deeply. There are people in the world of investments, Steve Schwartzman, John Gray, Henry Kravis, George Roberts, who on an early stage basis, their family offices will call us right away. Stan Druckenmiller was the first call I received when we invested in a company in New York, a spin-out of Memorial Sloan Kettering, that had very deep cancer data, but no AI expertise. And Stan Druckenmiller called me and said, Jim, this is a world-class, wonderful cancer institution. I'm extremely pleased with my patient experience, but they don't know the first thing about AI. Can you go sit with the leadership? And we've spun out several companies from Memorial Sloan Kettering as one example. Same is true with MD Anderson, Dell Medical School, UCSF. We've done 5 spin-outs where Mark Benioff has been the one who has called and said, Jim, you have to meet with this professor or that professor. So we have good leaders where we are top of mind and where we're every quarter asking them, who are the most interesting entrepreneurs you're seeing or hearing of? Michael Dell's son, Zach Dell, is a wonderful entrepreneur. And Zach called us and my son, Ted, when he was starting his new company. And so there are a number of cases where not only is it my relationship with someone as truly gifted as Michael Dell, where we back their sons or daughters.
What's Zach Dell doing? I don't know about his company.
He's applying artificial intelligence to the power industry.
Oh, interesting.
And he's doing really well.
And Breyer Capital has backed his company?
Yes, we have.
You've always been something of a Renaissance man. And here we are at Pebble Beach. There's a car show going on. Going back to when you were a Stanford undergrad, you were not an econ major or a finance major. You were interdisciplinary studies, which I guess was, I don't even really know what that is.
But mathematical sciences and computer science.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So it is more STEM than I thought.
It was more STEM.
Okay.
However, you mentioned the Renaissance. I spent half my junior year at Stanford in Florence and fell in love with the Italian Renaissance, not just Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Raphael and Botticelli, but many of the scientists as well. And so I'm a lover of where science and the arts intersect.
Right, and you're also you're a trustee at SF MoMA and
The Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yeah, I mean,
Finding a curator, and I have this conversation with our leaders at the Met, as well as SF MoMA, finding great curators is not that different in many ways from finding great entrepreneurs or finding the next generation wonderful artists. For the curators is in many ways like finding for a venture capitalist the great entrepreneurs. So at first blush, there doesn't seem to be that much intersection. But one of the joys, certainly, of what I've been able to do is follow what I love, whether it's music, whether it's the arts, whether it was 21st Century Fox and Marvel Entertainment, where there's a technology underpinning in many cases, but there's real fascination and intellectual fascination and excitement when I can marry art and music and fiction, travel, the global nature of investing with technology.
so your interests really do kind of inform, in some ways, how you invest, or maybe in more than in some ways, maybe
In many
ways. Yeah, yeah.
My children would say that, Dad, you're interested in too many things. And they are right.
Right, because how do you keep on top of all those areas?
It's hard.
Well, life is never dull though, right? There's always something interesting going on, another movie or another book or another art exhibit or whatever. Yeah.
And on that, one of my favorite boards is the American Film Institute. We are led by a gifted leader, Bob Ghazali, and AFI is an organization I've been involved with since 2011 as a trustee. And I get to talk to screenwriters and directors and actors and actresses. The last 2 years, what's been top of mind for all of them has been AI. And to go down and behind closed doors speak to 10 of the very best directors of the world about AI and how they should be thinking about AI is a gift. If I can't get excited about flying to Los Angeles and within Los Angeles having those kinds of meetings, then I don't know what I should be doing.
Yeah, because you already love film. So
I love film.
You were talking about university leaders earlier. At a time when so many universities are pushing engineering and STEM, and so many are worried about taking AI jobs, what do you think? Do you think there's a value in a liberal arts education? What would you tell your, future grandkids, or because your kid, or your youngest son, to study?
Well, it's so fascinating. And again, as an investor, I'm always testing and retesting my hypotheses at least 7 to 10 times a week, just actively testing and retesting. I would not have predicted 3 years ago that because AI would become so profound in coding that a traditional computer science degree would be less and less valuable. I knew it would be automated to some extent, but not at this breathtaking speed. I did not get that right. And so, if anything, the balance of skills is so important. I was back at Stanford 2 weeks ago speaking to a group of students who were there during the summer from all over the world. And of course, the question came up, what should I study? And like Jensen at NVIDIA and others, there's no doubt physical sciences is perhaps more fundamental and more defensible than ever before. Chemistry and physics in particular, and biology. But at the same time, there needs to be critical thinking. There needs to be an appreciation for far more than what the hard science might indicate. And that comes from liberal arts and very good social science, critical theory. So my advice, typically for what it's worth, always study linear algebra because it sits at the heart of artificial intelligence and at what is emerging as even more fundamental in many ways scientifically, and that is quantum technologies, where linear algebra is the key skill. But combine that with biology, or combine that with chemistry, or combine that with a love of an international language and culture exchange.
What about history?
Or
I feel like
history.
having a sense of a knowledge of history and what's come before is valuable to put what we're living through in some kind of context.
For sure. And my wonderful son, Daniel, was a history major, and I was absolutely thrilled. So I think we have to understand that critical thinking, analysis, writing skills, that is not being displaced in any way. However, technical understanding, empathy, proficiency is critical. When I'm doing interviews for a lot of the portfolio companies I've mentioned in AI, so often I'll ask the candidate, what book are you reading? What are the 2 or 3 latest films that you've seen that have had a great impact? And I am stunned in some cases that those are the hardest answers as opposed to an algebraic problem that I might pose. And so that balance is more important than ever.
What about what's going on between universities and government? Do you think more private funders will have to step in to support research? And is that the best way to support innovation in this country?
I think that the great universities probably didn't spend enough time thinking through what priorities should be. And prioritization is so important in everything we do, whether it's startups, high growth companies, private equity companies, portfolio companies, on and on. And so this is not all bad. There are a lot of changes that need to occur and are occurring in the world of higher ed. Now, does the pendulum, should it move 180 degrees? Probably not. Is it ever black and white? Probably not. But significant changes needed to be made. Cost structures at many university systems became bloated, not prioritized. And so much of the debate, in my view, is very healthy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the provost at UCLA right now, you're not happy about the fact that you might have to pay $1 billion to the government for behavior that allegedly went on there. I mean, I do feel like...
And a lot of these presidents, I have a love for higher ed. My parents came from Hungary with nothing but a love of education. They always argued between themselves, as I mentioned, as they grew older. Did they come to the United States with $500 each? 10 years later, they would say, we came with $250 each.
The sum decreased over time.
It kept decreasing. So there's a lot of
But
humor.
you know,
but they always said, what really matters is the education.
Yeah.
And I think we did lose a lot of the right instincts around what education really means. Many of the university presidents call me and ask, do you have any advice? And I like giving honest, behind-the-scenes advice, as we do in boards and behind closed doors. So I'm hopeful, but there need to be changes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you are a principal investigator of a big study that's ongoing and this funding gets cut in the middle of your study, that's something to really be upset about.
If I had to ballpark it, half the studies, again, when we're talking about science and engineering, absolutely 50% or more, 100% deserve 100% funding. However, there's a big number that should not have been funded.
So sometimes stuff that sounds really random may actually yield something. And so that's where you don't know it until you undertake the study.
That's right.
I think that's the hard part.
So take us way back to the very beginning. How did you get into venture capital in the first place?
Well, again, it started with pure luck. I was coming back from my tour at Stanford and Florence, and I sent a resume to Steve Jobs, who I admired from afar. And I can't say it was a resume. I put together a piece of paper with my interests and a cover letter. And God bless Steve, he forwarded the paperwork to the VP of marketing at the time at Apple, who asked me to come down to De Anza Boulevard, sit down for 2 hours. And Alan Oppenheimer was his name. He gave me a job, and I started working summers and part-time at Apple, just as the personal computer and the Mac were really becoming very
So
fundamental.
this would have been in the
1982,
yeah.
summer of 82. And I was living on the Stanford campus, so I got to know the 280 Drive very well. Fell in love with the nature of innovation and what Apple was doing, and went to business school at Harvard. Thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur and start my own company, and had a very mistaken idea that by spending a couple of years in venture capital, I would meet a lot of entrepreneurs, I would see a lot of business plans, and that would enable me to start my own company.
Oh, that was your initial
That was the initial thought.
I'll do this for a couple of years and then go work for my own company, create my own company.
That is correct. And boy, was I mistaken. Venture capital does not prepare us for being the entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur's job, and one of the reasons I love what I do, being a great entrepreneur and being part of a great founding team is the single hardest job in the world. And I have this debate with incredible neuroscientists and others, but it's the hardest job in the world.
Why?
You just have to marry so many different skill sets, the interpersonal challenges, vision, testing and retesting hypotheses, hiring and firing, and in many cases, trying to keep a personal life. And I have so much admiration for entrepreneurs. They are my heroes. So when I was in the venture business for a couple years at Accel, I thought, I don't think I'd be a great operating person. And I love investing. And I've always loved investing.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am a few years later. And I love investing, and I will be doing it forever. And that includes public investing as well as private. My boys and I talk a lot about public markets. Some of the very best investments that I've made are in public companies where I invested because I had a great conviction. Microsoft in 1996.
Good time to invest.
And that is up 75x from that investment, and I hold all those shares. The last 5 years, I've been very vocal about NVIDIA.
Going back to a now public company, but going back to Facebook one more time, you talked about how you put $1 million in alongside Accel put in 10 million back in 2005. Was that typical for you that you would put in your own money? Did you do that routinely with investments back then?
100%. So in every deal where I became a board member, I invested personally alongside the fund.
Why?
I have very strong conviction in the investments that I make, and I really feel just like I want founders to have skin in the game. I love it when investors have significant skin in the game. And so every investment I made where I joined the board, I made a personal investment. And the same was true in Circle, where I had such strong conviction in a team and an opportunity in 2013, despite what was happening in the world of public Bitcoin and scandals, that I felt I want to invest and continue to invest as I did in Facebook again and again as the opportunity presents itself.
I mean, when you were first investing in Facebook, and when you were on the board, I mean, the revenue increased a lot at the company. The company changed a lot between 2005 and 2013. But did you ever imagine it would have grown to be where it is today? The company the size of the company?
No, I had a strong conviction it would become very fundamental. But did I ever think it would be a couple $1 trillion of market cap, or almost a couple trillion of market cap? No, I did not.
Yeah.
But what I did have strong conviction on, and again, bringing together the boys as part of these discussions is so interesting. 4 months after the IPO, it was not a happy time at Facebook. And I was at the Red Carpet Club with my son Ted at JFK in September of 2012. And flashing on both CNBC and Bloomberg was Facebook hits an all-time low, $18, etc. And I'm there with Ted. He's looking up at the headlines. He knows I'm on the board. And so there's a perseverance that occurs in all of these high growth companies where you always are tested and there are always challenges. I learned a lot from the public boards at Walmart and Dell and 21st Century Fox. Again, many of these are owner operated or family businesses.
Right.
And a lot of people always said, why are you spending 5 times a year in Northwest Arkansas at Walmart? Well, I have learned so much from Doug McMillon and Rob Walton and Greg Penner and the Walmart team over the years on perseverance. Same is true with Blackstone. Same is true from Dell. These experiences taught me a lot. And a commonality in all of these well-run public companies is the night before a board meeting and the first hour of each board meeting, leadership, whether it's Steve Schwartzman or Doug McMillon or Michael Dell, starts with, here's the bad news. Always start with the bad news so that we as a board and investors are all on the same page, as opposed to what typically happens where, oh, here's all the good news and the bad news gets buried.
Yeah.
Always prepared to understand, here are the issues and challenges that we really need to address, whether it's around AI, whether it's private credit, whatever it might be. There are great opportunities typically, but you have to have that level set. And that's something we require from all of our portfolio companies. If they're not delivering the bad news first, they will not receive additional investment, period.
I would imagine, in addition to learning how these great public companies have operated, just the getting to know a whole nother world of people, right? Getting to know the other board members, the leaders of the company, the business, what's going on, what companies they're buying and selling, what they're seeing, just like another way to get a beat on what's going on in the economy.
Absolutely. So we haven't yet spoken about Austin and Texas, but with Dell, our board members were largely from Texas. Ross Perot Jr., Tom Luce, obviously Michael. And so I was going to Austin, Texas often and fell in love with it. And if I wouldn't have had the Dell experience and Michael and Susan Dell banging the table saying, Jim, you have to move to Austin, in 2018, I wouldn't have made the choice to move to Austin, Texas. But again, I would have not predicted that way back when, but those experiences on public boards have deeply informed my journey.
Right, because I mean, for VC, Silicon Valley's been the center of the venture capital world. So the idea that, I mean, that was kind of a big deal, right, for you to move to Austin. Yeah, that's interesting. One more thing going back to, a couple more things going back to Facebook. So who knew it was going to be a trillion plus company? But the other thing about Facebook's now Meta platforms is how it's changed so much of, social media has changed so much of the way we interact in our world. I mean, in human behavior. Did you have any inkling that that would be the case as well?
I did have an inkling of that. I did not fully appreciate how pervasive the influence worldwide would be. But again, with Mark in April of 2005, he was global from the first day. And he was talking about connecting billions of users in the first 6 months of our interactions. So I knew it would have deep global aspirations. And in fact, Javi, who is our chief operating officer, ran global. And
Who he used to work at.
it still does. Now he's the chief operating officer. And so he built and grew our international business in a spectacular fashion and is a dear friend.
The hour as if you're part of
Correct.
the Facebook family.
Correct.
Right.
They feel like family. I didn't appreciate early on how courageous Mark would be. This is someone who, in 2012, on the roadshow for the IPO, called me on a Friday night and said, there's a photo sharing company called Instagram, and we need to buy it. And I said, we have Facebook photos. What do you think? And he said, Instagram is 1% better, but in photos, that 1% is everything. So then I said to Mark, okay, how many people and how much is it going to cost? He said, 7 people, $1 billion. I knew enough about Mark in 2012 to say, you have my support. Because Mark instinctually understood, and still does, what is most fundamental, what can't you remodel, if you will. And that 1%, whether it was WhatsApp, whether it was Instagram, is everything. And that boldness, creativity, the ability to shut down efforts, like the Facebook phone, that's all Mark.
Yeah.
And so, again, Mark, the team, they're still a source of phenomenal deals. Mark personally introduced me to Daniel Ek at Spotify. So I'm also grateful
They're good friends, yeah.
to Mark and Daniel. And Daniel, again, is breathtaking in his own way. So some I didn't anticipate and appreciate. And then over time, some really resonates.
The other thing, of course, about social media is, and Instagram's part of this, that it's not all good, right? I mean, it's really, particularly for young kids, negative self-image. It's getting really challenging, bullying, stuff that's going on. That's really the dark side of all of that. I mean, do you think that Facebook's done enough, or what Mark and Meta has done enough to try and counter that?
It's never enough. With technologies, unfortunately, there are foreseen and unforeseen consequences. And we're right in the middle of those discussions with AI. It's very challenging in many ways. If we dial forward now to AI, what should the guardrails be? But we can all agree there are certain guardrails. And so implementing guardrails voluntarily, and perhaps from a regulatory standpoint around AI, is important. And in many ways, if it's light and high level, doesn't in any way compromise what I believe is deep fundamental growth. And that's where we are in AI. So there are a lot of lessons from social networking or from other technologies where we should be applying a lot of that thinking to AI today.
Do you think there should be a lot of government regulation on AI?
Very light, so not a lot, but call it a little bit. Very light touch is what I'd be in favor of. And that's what I've communicated when they ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll see how that plays out. Yeah. Let's go back to Breyer Capital. You officially founded it in 2006, right? But you were still at Excel for until what, 2014-ish? Why did you found Breyer Capital, and how did you operate the two of them? Operate as an Excel partner while Breyer Capital was in existence.
So I had, as we discussed at the very beginning of our discussion, deep interest in a number of different areas. And Breyer Capital was organized and founded around the idea that I wanted to be a full-time venture capitalist, but love investing and love investing in private equity, love investing in entertainment, media, and a number of different areas. And so one of the instigators was when Ike Perlmutter of Marvel called me in 2005. Marvel was a small, undercapitalized public company. He had read about me through Forbes in an article and my interest in entertainment. Ike said, we're doing okay at Marvel, but we need a lot of help in technology. When you're through Palm Beach or New York, let's have dinner. So I said, Ike, I'm coming. When can you do it? So we met and we had dinner in Palm Beach, and then again shortly thereafter in 2005 in New York. Marvel Entertainment was deemed not to be in the wheelhouse of a venture capital firm focused on technology. So I talked to the partners, talked to many of the limited partners who I adored at Accel, and they said, this just doesn't fit the Accel mission. So I said, is it okay if I personally invest and join the board? And they said, of course. So I joined the board of Marvel in 2005. And at that point, I knew there needed to be a vehicle, if you will, an investment vehicle where I could take advantage of what I felt were deeply compelling investment opportunities outside classic early stage venture capital. We were not in the growth business at that point. And so I formed Breyer Capital, and that's how it all started. So whether it was Marvel Entertainment or 21st Century Fox, Legendary Entertainment, there were a number of media-oriented companies where Accel and the Accel Limited Partners did not feel that was warranted for the mission of a Silicon Valley venture capital firm. But for me, I have such passion in investing in those areas. I felt it was very important to do that.
And the Accel leadership was fine with you doing sort of another side job or like side investing through on your own. I mean, did that take a lot of time to be?
I was on the board of Marvel,
yeah,
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It all worked out.
Yeah. No, I mean, here you are today. It did work out.
It all worked out for the, most importantly,
yeah.
The Accel Limited Partners that had really become deep friends and great partners. And I always viewed many of our limited partners as the customer. They were highly supportive. Mm-hmm. They were highly supportive and said, if this is something you really want to do, it's like a museum. As long as you're continuing to invest aggressively and thoughtfully, we highly support it. And in fact, some great deals. Again, Spotify was one where the Marvel reference checks were fundamental around how important would entertainment streaming be, and heavily informed my bet on Daniel Ek and Spotify.
And did you raise outside capital at all for Breyer Capital, or is it all your own?
It's always been my own.
Mm-hmm. And so both of your your sons Daniel and Ted are partners.
Yes.
Why did you decide to make them partners?
One, I never wanted to pressure them to join business or the venture capital business. And they both had a natural inclination to do it. I encouraged them to talk to other venture capital firms or other investment firms. And they built wonderful relationships with many of the very best-known venture capital firms in the world. But they wanted to work together, and they wanted to work with me at Breyer Capital. So in 2020, they both joined Breyer Capital.
And they had a little bit of experience after college elsewhere before they joined?
Exactly.
Yeah. So your son Daniel's novel, Smokebirds, portrays venture capital investor in the story, Richard, as a video game addicted, somewhat subpar investor who got lucky with a bet on a virtual reality and mobile game company. What is your take on that portrayal?
First of all, I could not be prouder And it's funny because Daniel at age 7 and 8, if you would have asked me what will he do, his passion was being a director. We used to debate Stanley Kubrick and the quality of 2001 Space Odyssey and Kubrick movies versus Scorsese movies versus The Godfather and Godfather 2. And he has a gift for writing. And I could not be prouder. Again, he has been an extraordinary venture capitalist and partner. I think the portrayals are fascinating. As a dad, there's a lot of self-reflection. And again, I hope he writes a second novel, and I could not be prouder. And the portrayals, again, like fiction and nonfiction, a little like the Social Network movie. People used to always ask me, how much is fiction? How much is nonfiction? I would always say it's 50-50, and I'm not telling you which is fiction and which is nonfiction. The series Succession, I was on the board of 21st Century Fox for 10 years. People would ask me, Succession, fiction, nonfiction? I'd say a little of both, and I'm not telling you anything more. And Daniel is a fiction writer. And at the same time, he grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley. So I personally think it's a brilliant novel, but I'm his dad.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun to read it. Just being like knowing your story, and then his very dark portrayal of this family and all of the people in it I've enjoyed it. It's been a good book. We talked a little bit about Austin. What is it about Austin that really, besides Michael and Susan Dell saying, you got to move here, Jim, what really did attract you, and has it met your expectations?
Well, it's beaten the expectations. Start with the easy part. So Michael and Susan laid it out perfectly, and I'd been going 4 or 5 times a year. So I knew the city well, but as a visitor. And there were a number of elements that appealed to me. And some of this will resonate just based on the discussion we've had so far. I love music. We have pretty good music in Austin, Texas. I love film. We have a very small but vibrant film community in Austin. Austin, and I would say the state of Texas, has an optimism that is truly wonderful if we're interested in startups and changing the world.
One thing that we haven't really talked about, Jim, you spent a lot of time in China, investing in China. And what do you think the opportunities are there for U.S. companies and investors in China now?
Bleak. And I think, again, at a high level, the macro political climate is such that it's very difficult to make investments in China. And I don't know when that will change. So for the last 4 years, we've made no new investments in China. A lot of the Chinese entrepreneurs went to Singapore or Dubai, and there is...
Like CZ Finance?
Correct. And there is great talent, like CZ elsewhere and in Singapore. But I think as an investor, we also have to step back and say sometimes the macro environment is such we just don't do anything. And we pause and put a permanent pause on until there's a fundamental change.
Do you have existing investments that you've invested in Chinese companies that you're just holding on to, that you haven't exited?
Very small at this point in time. There were some very happy early successes, Tencent being notable, and Alibaba and Baidu. But it's just not something that we are equipped to analyze and invest in at this point in time. I hope that there are ways that 2 countries can find ways of mutual cooperation. I think in hospitals and healthcare, and applying some AI to improving patient outcomes is in the mutual interest of the world. But I'm a venture capitalist, and a lot of this is outside my lane. And that's the conclusion of Breyer Capital.
Speaking of hospitals and healthcare, you recently hired a new partner at Breyer Capital, Morgan Cheatham. He's a Forbes under 30 alum.
Yes, he is.
Super talented young guy. Talk about that hire. Why did you bring him in, and what are you hoping he'll do for your firm?
We've been trying to recruit Morgan for 2 years. So Morgan and Daniel were classmates at Brown, and they met freshman year. I met Morgan his sophomore year and stayed in very close touch. And Morgan has always been passionate about medicine. He's a Brown Medical School person. He's now studying very deep biology at Harvard and at the Boston hospitals. Had a wonderful career for the last 10 years at Bessemer. And Morgan was our wish list hire for a number of years, given our interest in AI, computation, biology, and medicine. He's joined us now full-time. He's 6 months into the job. I can say he's brilliant. The interactions personally, professionally, are fantastic. He wants to change medicine the way I do in terms of patience, longevity, improving outcomes. And so we have a fabulous working relationship. I love the fact that we've known him for a decade. It was a very unique opportunity, and he has hit the ground running, and that's even an understatement. He is a gifted investor.
Well, I hope that he makes some great more investments for your firm. I mean, it seems like a very competitive environment, right? There's plenty of VC firms that just do healthcare and life sciences, that have larger number of partners and multi-presence on both coasts and the stuff. So, you've got potential co-investors, but also competition, right?
You bet. But what we really love is where computation sits at the heart of the healthcare life sciences opportunity. And if it is a pure biotech or it's pure life sciences where computation doesn't play a truly fundamental role, just as I mentioned, Marvel way back in the day was outside the strike zone, we will not invest. We look at where artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence technologies can and will create profound outcomes. And that's the heart and soul of our computation life sciences investment thesis.
So that would leave out just traditional drug development that's not really using a lot of AI then. You just put that, leave
That
those
is
others.
correct. Although most really smart drug development these days is using AI.
Yeah.
And we are not very far from where AI will develop fundamental new drugs, whether it's 12 months, 24 months. There will be AI-developed drugs where one will question 2 years or 3 years from now, does this outcome deserve a breakthrough prize or Nobel Prize? So that's how quickly it's moving.
Well, I look forward to that. We could use, there's so much unsolved medical problems, and we could use better drugs and with fewer side effects and all that kind of stuff going forward. So you are 64 years old at a time when many Americans would be thinking about retirement. What's your plan? Or do you see yourself working many, many more years? Do you see yourself slowing down already? What's going on?
I love what I do, and I take inspiration, again, from my mentors, Steve Schwartzman, George Roberts, Henry Kravis. My belief is I would be reading investment books and medical journals in my free time, even if I were not investing. And so for now, I love what I do. And if I can't get excited about investing in companies that improve longevity, save lives, make fundamental differences, then I should be doing something else. But I wake up in the morning and I'm energized. I love what I do. And if one of these companies, an AI and life sciences company that's focused on cardiology, is 6 months late, that's lives that will not be positively impacted. So there's an intensity and urgency to get this right. I love what I do. I love intersecting with top academics and entrepreneurs. And I think we're at the very beginning of what is a decade of truly fundamental opportunity. I'm also very competitive when it comes to returns, as you know. And I see the opportunity. If I've had 4 companies at 100x thus far, maybe there are 3 or 4 in the portfolio that will currently be on a path where they'll be 100x or better. I'd like to find another 3 or 4 and at some point be able to tell you I've found 10 companies that have delivered better than 100x.
If it's a niche problem, let's say.
I think personally, I'm wired around the idea of generating fantastic returns. There may be a day where we raise outside money from entrepreneurs and friends and many of the people I've mentioned who have asked to invest alongside. I know I am happiest when I am changing the world through an investment, and there is that kind of long-term opportunity to make, call it, better than 20x, and in some cases, go for the gold. And I'm wired that way. So I would like to say, yes, I'd be very pleased with a mission where we're generating important companies where it's 5x over 5 years, but I'm not wired that way. And so given early stage risk reward investing, I still love the promise of going for the grand slam.
I think that's a good note to end it on. Jim, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me and to Forbes. And we wish you the best and look forward to whatever new 100x companies come out of your portfolio. And thanks for speaking with me.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.